It's a special segment this morning here, and we are going to be telling you who's joining us, a very special guest, but you know him already as he is a News Central correspondent. But over the week, we had a very interesting investigative piece go out, a documentary on the Japa syndrome. And it was brought to us none other than by our very own Marshall, who's in the studio here with us. Marshall, you are welcome. Good to have you here.
Thank you, Mazina.
Looking a bit too dapper. I don't like it when you do this.
See you, Mitch.
It's okay. It's all right, Judith. It's all right.
You look beautiful as well.
Welcome, Marshall.
I do my best. Thank you so much, Marshall. And also, well done as well. Interesting piece. Funny thing is, we have the privilege to be behind the scenes and see when you go through your process and go through all of it. But for the benefit of those who are just watching, what inspired you to go ahead and do this piece, to go on investigative journalism? How were you able to get... don't tell us your trade secrets, but why this piece?
Okay, so this piece was inspired, it was informed by the victims who had reached out to us to say, look, this was currently going on in Vietnam. They were Nigerians who had come into Vietnam at the time, and they were promised jobs by agents who were supposedly back home here in Nigeria, some of whom they had not met. They had just barely spoken on phone and had agreed to, do visa, as they would put it, do visa for them to countries like Canada and America. And by the time the negotiation gets deeper and probably these guys get to make some financial commitment, you'd find that the story will change. And the agents will begin to say, oh, things like the Canadian connection is no longer valid, the American connection is no longer valid, but we can get you jobs in Vietnam, Bermuda, and Cyprus. Those are countries that, they pander around the conversation. And then because these guys have already made financial commitment, they'll just settle for less. And 3 years back, the Vietnamese government had advertised they had made English a compulsory subject in their tertiary education and secondary schools, which was not the case ab initio. And they had advertised for English teachers from countries like Ghana, Nigeria, and they were going to give stay, so to speak, some citizenship to an extent to people who would apply for these jobs and qualify. And so there was an influx of people from these countries in Vietnam. But as it turns out, last year, the Vietnamese government turned that policy around. But you still find these predators who would prey on unsuspecting Nigerians advertise the same thing that the Vietnamese government had advertised 3 years ago, claiming that there are jobs, and would offer these victims the same employment letters that were used back in the time when that exercise was still valid. So they'll fall prey, take these employment letters, have them apply for visiting visas, and then get to Vietnam, maybe for a month, valid for a month or 3, only to find out that there are no jobs. And before leaving, they'll tell them, don't worry, because by the time you get your visa, you'd find out that it's a visiting visa or a tourist visa, and then you'd begin to question as to why it's not a work permit and all of that. They'll tell you when you get there, you would call so-so-so person and all of that. And trust me, there were people who paid 9 million. There were those who paid 5 million, 2.5, and, and all sorts.
I want to ask, there was some unwritten or, observable factor inside of the documentary that you put together. Now, you call them predators. My question is, does it seem, or is it just me, that they are preying on a certain class of people? If they are indeed preying on a particular class of people, is 9 million naira not so much to get? Do you have 9 million in your account now?
Don't do this to me on national television.
So my question is, if they're preying on a certain class of people, how are these people themselves still able to afford these huge amounts that are being bandied about for them to be able to leave Nigeria?
Zina, I tell you, it's mind-boggling, But I tell you, the thing about Japa syndrome, that is the quest to want to leave the shores of Nigeria for a search of greener pasture or a prospect of greener pasture beyond the shores of Nigeria, has nothing to do with class. I think because of the economic realities we are currently confronted by in Nigeria, everybody seems to want to settle for anything other than, being here. So, but the thing is, with the money, once they start these conversations, you might have 500,000, you might have ₦1 million. You just want to start the conversation and see the realities of how you can get across. And the moment you start, you get stalked, and you would want to see it to finish. Some of them take up loans, some of them sell their landed properties, some of them sell their cars, you know, whatever they can lay their hands on just to liquidate and get the funds to pay these agents to get across. So it's not about class.
How do they find those agents? How do they find those predators, the agents that are facilitating this Japa?
More than 80% of them you would find online. You just simply Google, how can I immigrate to wherever, Canada?
So they're just right there in plain sight on your mobile phone?
You find flyers, you find banners, you find write-ups, you find articles, you find videos on YouTube, so across social media platforms. And some of them you'd even find posters on streets. In fact, one of the victims whom we spoke with said he found, he sent us a picture of the poster where he got the number of the agent and the streets of Umuahia in Abia State. You know, it was just immigrate to Canada, will give you work permit, paying $10,000 and then phone number. So he reached out to the guy.
Paying $10,000
as salary. And then he reached out to the guy and they got talking. And then he found himself in Vietnam. The day he got to Vietnam, he found out that there was no job, started crying, made all attempts to get back home. Before you knew what was happening, his visiting visa had expired and he was, you know, caught up against the law. And the authorities came to get him.
And he was deported back to Nigeria.
Well, you don't get deported that way. You know, there are procedures. You would pay some fines, and if you cannot meet up with your fine government expectations in terms of the fine, you either get detained, you'll be asked to reach out to your loved ones back home to see if they can get these fines paid off.
Okay.
So it's an interesting piece. It's going to break by 7:30 tonight. You know, would like everyone to tune in and really watch a lot of things. And we do hope that it's going to be an unfolding series.
And also to stir conversation as well.
Yes, yes.
Did you speak with any of these predators yourself? And how far did that go?
We did. So we reached out to several of them. We did what we usually would do from, you know, the back end. You'd find they would equally lie to us. They lied to us about where they were at the time, just the same way they had lied to some of these applicants, candidates, so to speak. You know, some of them said they were in Thailand, some said they were in Canada, but they were going to run the package for us here. But when we eventually did our GPS, you know, tracking, we found out that they were within our locales. We had scheduled some appointments to meet, but you find them evading. You'd find them, you know, moving appointments and venues.
And the victims of this predators and these agents, was it the same for them? Were they also evading, you know, a meet-up, or was it just mostly virtually the transactions between them until they got to Vietnam?
Certainly, certainly. But there were a few cases where, after paying, you would find that these victims would come to Lagos or Abuja and want to board, and they'll tell them, when you come to the airport to board, I'll send somebody to help you board. And even at that point, when you get to the airport, the person who would be sent, either, I want to believe most times it will be the same agent, but would want to make it look like I am not the one who's coming to meet you, just in case you get crazy and you want to, you know, put up some arrest, or, you know, around that. So they'll say they'll send someone, and the person would come, and even at that point in time, you'll still find them defrauding these people of the physical cash they're having. Like one person, a few of them were asked, how much are you having? And you say, oh, I have ₦1 million. I say, oh, no, you can't cross with ₦1 million. Bring it. So I'll do you a wire transfer. Just when you get across the guys who check, you know, the immigration guys who check you at the airport, when you're waiting to board, I'll find my way from behind and I'll come and give you your car.
What?
That's a lie, obviously.
And you'll never hear of that again, you know.
Wow.
So
you must have done some research before actually going after these guys. I'd like to know exactly how many Nigerians leave Nigeria. I don't know if you have all of these numbers, but how many Nigerians leave Nigeria successfully, legally, and how many Nigerians actually fall prey to these kinds of apparatus that people are putting
a lot of Nigerians leave Nigeria legally, you know. But in terms of the numbers, I might not be able to put it, but I'll tell you this. On a daily basis, you find these people trooping into these countries. My sources in Vietnam keep telling me, even at the time we had put the final mark on the peace we want to break by 7:30, we still had reports coming in from Vietnam to say 5 people just entered.
Wow.
This is their communication. 7 people just entered. Now, the Nigerian community, some people who are legally there have put up some kind of groups to give some kind of relief and hear these people and help them to channel some of their complaints to the Vietnamese government and the Nigerian consulate there. So they are the ones, most of the time, who give me this report that, 5 people had just reported to our group, 10 people had just reported, even after we had done our research. So you'd find, even as we speak, people are either in the airport getting on board to, get to Vietnam, or while some are getting off board or alighting from the plane in Vietnam to find out that it's not as juicy as they promised.
It makes me wonder, because you just said that the authorities in Vietnam and also the Nigerian consulate, the embassy there as well, they know these people, they're seeing them. So why is there no PSA or some sensitization from, the Nigerian authorities to be able to tell people that, okay, as much as you'd like to leave, don't fall prey to this type of people? Did you speak to any authorities of Nigerian embassies in diaspora and even here in Nigeria as part of efforts to stop this? Because you're saying there's more still coming and more still unfolding.
Yes. So we have the DG of the Nigerian Diaspora Commission,
yes.
NICOM. We will have her coming on subsequent episodes or series that we're putting up, but we've spoken to the Chief of Mission, IOM, which is International Organization for Migration. We've spoken with the Chairman House Committee on Diaspora. We had also scheduled a meeting with the Chairman, Minister of Interior, to look at the role of the immigration and even customs by extension in this matter. Now, you raise a question as to why isn't there enough campaign or awareness, to tell Nigerians that this is the right way to travel. Well, I feel that would be the job of the National Orientation Agency, the IOM, who's been doing a lot of campaigns towards this area and helping people get back and resettled in Nigeria when they're deported. They are also doing several campaigns. It might not be enough, but that's the much they can do within their purview. But I tell you, they are doing these campaigns. But on a larger scale, we would expect naturally the National Orientation Agency to take this up and do more. NAPTIP as well, who is in charge of trafficking in persons, we expect them to do more because they are on the home front.
But now, you've spoken about due diligence, you've spoken about the purview of certain organizations or authorities. What about the individual? What about me? If I was going, apart from getting a number from off of the streets and saying, okay, go to Canada, I'm going to call this number. Apart from that, what triggers would I find if I'm going to, if I'm trying to detect that this is a falsehood? What would trigger me in that kind of a communication with these, I was going to call them bandits, with these predators we call them?
So for someone who's desperate, mark the word desperate. Desperation can do a lot of things to you. It can blind you totally to the realities or consequences of your actions at a time when you're taking certain actions. So desperation would make these people not see the red flags. For instance, you see a post, I mean, if I am in the business of immigrating people or travel for people to resettle and get jobs in Canada and America, I do not think my posters will be on the streets. Then fine, if I choose to put my posters on the streets and then you call me up, I should have a physical stationary office where you can walk in and, make your inquiries and talk with, interface with 1 or 2 persons. That is non-existent. And then I go ahead and tell you, look, my own is just to do visa for you. Send your money and I'll do the visa for you. And how do people get to do visa? When I spoke with the IOM chief, he said, people shouldn't pay for embassy officials, people who claim to be embassy officials, to do visas for them. There is just a token that is expected of you to pay when you apply for a visa. We all know that. Yes. But the desperate Nigerians, the man on the street doesn't know that. He just feels Mazino knows better. I can get across to Mazino and then he'll help me put the papers and documents together. He'll help me get across to someone who's in Vietnam to get me a job. So that's the level of ignorance that is displayed here.
And I would also love to have talked about, the women and children as well, where their children that was, trafficked or in this situation. Did you encounter women and children?
Yes, there were people who sold their hold assets in Nigeria to get their entire family across because they were giving employment letters. They were giving fake employment letters. And in as much as you got fake employment letter or an employment letter, you got a tourist visa.
You know, Marshall, 7:30, yes?
7:30.
7:30. Let's not give them
Spoilers.
too much of the deeds and the juice in it.